What's up, Game Devs? T-Chan here, and welcome to episode 8 of Game Devs Loadout, where I chat with today's most experienced game developers 7 days a week. We will learn about their backgrounds, the obstacles they have to overcome, and the tools they use to be effective. And today's featured guest is Keith Turkowski. Keith, it is go time. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So Keith is the lead developer at Lazy 8 Studios, and he worked on games such as Everquest and Section 8. He has been in the game industry for around 11 years. So pay attention, Game Nation, because we have a very experienced game developer here. Keith, go ahead and give us a bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
Yeah, so I'm actually the lead programmer at Lazy 8 Studios. I got started in the game industry after I started playing Everquest when it first came out, and I really liked the game, and I actually got invited to the fanfare and a summit with Sony Online Entertainment, which was kind of like a bit like they have like a little convention for their players. And so anyway, I went there, and there were probably 1,000 or several hundred players there for the convention, and one of the things they had was like this little puzzle that you could solve. And anyway, I ended up solving it like really quickly, and they were expecting it to take people the entire convention to solve it. So after I solved it, I was talking to some of the developers, and I guess they thought that was a good sign. So they talked to me for a while, and then ended up offering me a job doing systems design on Everquest at Sony Online Entertainment. So I took the job, and it was really awesome, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Hey, that's cool, because you played a game that you enjoyed, and you got to solve a puzzle on it, and spoke with the developers for the game, and then you got the job. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I always told people, like, I used to tell, like, after I became a developer, I would tell players that, like, I leveled up to developer. Like after level 100, it's like developer.
Oh, that's awesome. So, you're a lead developer. Is that your main area of expertise?
So now I do programming with Lazy 8 Studios. Well, I kind of am working on my own project now, and I'm the pretty much the main developer on that. But before that, I was a game designer. So I worked on Everquest and as a systems designer. So depending on the company, there can be different breakdowns in like what types of designers they have. So they'll have like, some companies will have like level designers, general game designers, and then they'll have systems designers. So level designers kind of work with artists a lot, and they kind of lay out levels for, depending on the game, like either, if it's a MMO or something like that, they'll be working on setting up the terrain and stuff. And similarly, they'll be doing that in an FPS, but and in both games, they'll be setting up like triggers and things like that. And then game designers kind of do more general things. Like they could help interface with level designers, but they'll often be working on like game systems a little bit. But then, they kind of are like, maybe they'll be designing quests or things like that. And then systems designers are actually designing the mechanics of the game. So they'll be deciding like, what abilities you have, if there's magic in the game, what the spells will be like. And those systems designers generally need more technical skills because there's often like some math involved and that sort of thing. So anyway, that's what I did. Now I actually have a background in programming. I got computer science degrees in undergrad, and I think that was, a lot of game designers start in a lot of different places, and some people do different. Some people go to, it's literally there's no like one degree that people have, but I would say computer science and being a programmer really helped a lot because I was able to do all that system stuff, and systems designers interface with the programmers on the team a lot. So being able to understand what they're doing is really beneficial, and it's actually helped in a lot of cases. So.
How do you maximize your team effectiveness when you work with other talents?
I think I've learned this over time, and I think I've especially appreciated the way at my latest company, it was like a small Lazy 8 Studios, it's like a smaller team. But I think the most important thing is kind of give everybody their own area of responsibility. And actually, some companies have very strict hierarchies and some have very loose. But in both situations, everybody kind of has their own realm. And it's like if you give people freedom and they know exactly what they own and what they don't own, I think it can help. And then, and sometimes there'll be conflicts or people have disagreements on ideas. But I think you need to make it clear whose decision it is for each thing in the process. And then when you have those disagreements, you should listen to what everybody else has to say. But then the person who's responsible for making decisions should just say, okay, I've heard what everybody has to say. I understand your points, and I'm just going to make an executive decision and do this. And if everybody can respect that, then I think it works really well. Because I've had projects where I was really debating for doing things one way, and then like the company president or something was talking. He's like, okay, well, I just decided we're going to go this way, but I understood what the pros and cons of both things. And I was if it's not your responsibility, it's easier, I guess, sometimes for some people to let it go. Like, okay, well, I made my argument, and then, if things don't work out, I can say I told you so later. But anyway, just move on.
You're right. Each person needs to have a clear set of tasks, because
right.
Overall, there should be like a game design document where it lists what everybody needs to do and what needs to be accomplished within a certain period of time.
I was going to say one other thing is like, sometimes it's important but I think it's also important to let people have their own freedom in their own area. Like I remember because people have to learn. And one way you can learn is through making a mistake. But it's like, if you're constantly correcting other like less senior designers' mistakes, then they don't feel like they own their product and they're not going to be as motivated. And I think it actually turns out worse. So sometimes it's like, if you're like at a higher level, you got to look at what they're doing. You say, well, you could try to give them some advice, but if they really don't want to do it that way, or they think they know what's the right way to do it, and they disagree with you, sometimes you're just like, okay, well, I'll let you do it, and if you fail, maybe you'll learn, and if maybe I'm wrong, and you'll do it. But it's important for them to be able to have some ownership, because if you're constantly getting overruled, or somebody's just coming in and changing stuff, then it's like you'd lose motivation, and actually I think the end result is much worse.
I can see that, because you're working on this certain part of the game, and then all of a sudden someone just comes over and so you're doing it wrong, you gotta do it this way,
right.
and instead of learning it from themselves, which is usually sometimes a better learning experience, someone comes in and just trumped on their ego or something like that. And that's not good. So on the game design and your programming, if people had to teach themselves these expertise, what would you suggest they use?
Oh, I'll tell you the most useful thing, I think, both in programming and designing, probably many other things, is you have to have a goal before you can do it. Like, you should do anything. I've known lots of people that said to me, hey, I want to learn to be a programmer or something, or I want to be a game designer. And that, they'll read a book, or they'll like watch some online tutorials, but it's like they don't have an objective. And it's like, if you don't have an objective, it's like you're just learning these skills and you're not applying them. You have no motivation to apply them. So it's not gonna help you. So for example, like if you wanted to be a programmer, just come up with a simple idea, like say, okay, I want to make a simple program that like does, like generates some documents on my computer automatically or something like that. It's like, well, when you have that when you have that objective, then you can start working towards it, and it's like you actually have a real project that's motivating you. And if you don't have that, then it can be hard to like find your way. You're just like, okay, well, I learned how to do a binary sort, or I learned to do something, but you have no application for it. There's no way to apply it, so you're not gonna probably retain the knowledge very well.
Like another way of saying that is to have the end in mind. Why are you doing this? Why are you programming this? Why? What's the point, I guess? And the why is like the reason. It gives you purpose for the reason you're doing it. And always have the end in mind of why you're creating this, how it's going to help you in the future, or how it's going to help your current situation too.
It's kind of like actors, have you ever heard actors say like, "What's my motivation?"
Yeah.
So it's like that. I think everybody needs that, like whether you're programming or designing or artist, you're like, what's my motivation? Like, what am I trying to do? So.
And what are your key principles for better game development?
I'd say the biggest thing that everybody forgets and overlooks, and this is like for game design, I guess, is design a game for your target audience. So like, I've read a couple of really good game design books, and they always mention like the target audience, and I think a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, overlook that because they're like, someone will be like, oh man, I really love playing like, Call of Duty or whatever, and I'm gonna make, a first person shooter. And then they get on a project and they're making like the Barbie, dress up game or whatever. And it's like, well, you gotta put yourself in the shoes of the person you're designing for, and you gotta make a game for them. Like, and it can be hard because, and I'd say almost, 90% or a large percentage of game designers are just designing a game for themselves. They're not looking at their target audience. So I think if you really want to be like a next level designer, you gotta look at your demographics. You gotta say, okay, this game is for like, 13 to 15-year-old boys, or it's for like, middle-aged women, or whatever your target audience is. You got to look at it. You got to say, okay, well, this is for people who like first-person shooters or like RPGs or whatever. You got to understand their mindset and what they're interested in and how they're going to be playing the game, and then you got to design for that. Like I know, like, and it's the same is true for programmers. It's like if you're designing a mobile game, don't test your game on desktop because, you got to look at where you're going to be playing the game, who your target audience is, and then make it for them. And I think that's the best general piece of advice I could give, because it's so many people overlook it.
Branding and marketing plays a big role in making sure your game gets out to the right people. Luckily, there's like a lot of marketing tools now, like Facebook ads and Google ads, but you have to like specifically put it to where it's targeting the audience you want, people who's into pets. Like if you're making a pet game, you want to target pet people, not people who hates pet or have no interest in it. That wouldn't make it sense. Yeah. And you would waste money in marketing. So yeah, targeted marketing is definitely a huge difference. Take note of that. That's really important for sure.
Yeah, marketing is definitely important, and it's really hard if you're a developer. I mean, most developers know very little about marketing, but it's very important. I'd say that's another thing. It's like if you're an independent developer or you're just a small studio, I would say figure out your marketing before you start developing, because you're going to finish the product and then you're going to be like, okay, well, who's my market?
Yeah, you want to do the research before that, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've been in the game industry for a while, and, creating a game can be very long and difficult. So what was the biggest hurdle you had to face and overcome in the game industry? Like it could be an obstacle or an emotion. Be very detailed about it.
One of the biggest challenges probably is, and this is almost in every game company, is working overtime or crunching. And I don't know if you really overcome it. You just struggle through it. Like, so I'd say the worst example, or the best example maybe, is of crunch time is when I was working on Everquest, and we were putting out expansions every 5 or 6 months, which is, we had like, our team was not, maybe I almost say it was like maybe a little too small, but we were just working really hard. And I remember one week we were 2 weeks before launch, and they had a big fire in the area, and they actually like shut down the studio for a week, which was like, we were already crunching. So like just not being able to work for a week was like, really bad. And the studio was like, oh, don't worry, we'll push back the launch by a week, so you'll still have the time. So when we came back after the week of the studio, they had like put out the fire finally, I guess, or got it under control. They're like, oh, we said we could push it back a week, but we actually can't. So
oh, no.
It was like, when you're already working like 60-hour weeks, and you've got 2 60-hour weeks, probably, no, including weekends, probably like more than that, And then they're like, well, now you have like a 120-hour week or whatever. And it's like, you're like trying to work. Yeah, that was like really hard. And I guess another challenge would have been when I was working on Aliens Colonial Marines with Gearbox, and there were 4 layers of bureaucracy above me or something, and below it was like, I had to rename. I remember I had to rename. I came up with a name for one of the aliens, and apparently it had been used for some toy in the 80s, some aliens toy. So they were like, okay, you can't use that name. So I was like, okay. So I was like, I didn't really care what it was called, but they, like when that happened, they were like, okay, well, come up with a list of like 20 names. And then I sent that to like the producer at TimeGate, and then that went to Gearbox, and then that went to Sony, and then that went to Paramount or whoever owns anyway, I forget all the companies involved. There were a lot of them, but they were like 12 people on the thread, and it took a week to come up with one name, and I don't even remember what the name is now. It was like Crusher or something. but yeah, it's like that was, dealing when you work with multiple studios like that, I'd say the bureaucracy, it gets in the way, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure quite how you fix that, but maybe streamline it a little bit, connect people better.
Yeah, and that's tough. Everything you just experienced. What should they take away from all this?
Don't work in the game industry unless you really like making games, because you probably won't get a lot of fame. You probably won't get a lot of fortune, but maybe you'll have some fun.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. There's stories about this all the time, and I guess it just comes with the territory. And in the future, hopefully, game companies will be better at it. You just got to push through it and keep making games. Yeah, if you really love making games, you just got to keep making games and do your best to overcome everything.
I remember when I worked at Sony Online Entertainment, and we were, I mean, like I was talking about crunch, like we worked really hard. You sit in a cubicle. Then we have these like fanfares, which are like these conventions. And like when you go to that's like one weekend a year. You go to that, and like all the players are like, "Oh man, you're so awesome. We love your game." It's awesome because, people are telling you like they're like, at least they are interested or really into what you're doing. And it's like, it's almost glamorous, right? But it's like but I remember one of the other developers, he's actually now the lead designer on Everquest. He was talking to me, and he said, all the players think that this is what it's like every day being a game designer, but it's like every day it's just sitting there and working. It's not that exciting actually, but players always see you at these conventions and they think, oh man, that's what it's like to be a game designer. And he's like, I wish it was like that, but it's not. So.
Yeah, but in the end, once you get that game out there and people do enjoy it, I'm pretty sure it's an awesome feeling.
Yeah, it is. It's very satisfying. It's very satisfying to see people playing your game and being really into it. So yeah, it's great.
What is the one thing you're most excited about today?
Right now my main focus is like this it's a game idea that I've had of my own for several years, and I'm the lead, the developer on it, and I'm really close to being done with it. It's like a mobile game, primarily designed to be a mobile game, but it's like it's a very zen game where you fly around and collect butterflies. But hopefully I'll be done with that in a couple months, and I'll see all those years of planning come to fruition, and I can see how people like it. I don't know. It's like my first solo indie game, which is like maybe where a lot of people started out, but I started off with AAA studio working on MMO RPG with a big team, and then went to FPSs, and then I went to an indie Lazy 8 Studios, which is independent, kind of a small indie company, and now I'm like basically working by myself. I mean, I work with other people, but everything is on me, So I'm very excited to see how that turns out, and hopefully people like it. And even if they don't, I got to do what I wanted, so that's what really matters.
Now, the halftime, or we're way past halftime now, but the last few questions, I actually call it crunch time because I'm going to ask you questions in very fast pace, and it's going to be nothing but valuable information that you're going to be giving out. So, Keith, are you ready to crunch time?
Yeah, let's ship it.
Oh yeah, nice one. What was holding you back from becoming a game developer?
It's really hard to get into the industry, so breaking the ice is hard. Someone told me once the only way you can be a designer is if you've already been a designer. So I'd say just getting your foot in the door is like the first step, and it's hard. So you just got to try, and it's like rolling a D20. How many times you have to roll before you crit.
Yeah, and it's important that you try and not just do nothing. You got to try in order to see something happen. So just go out there and try it, Game Nation.
I'll say one other thing. It's like people are like, how can I become a game designer or something? It's like, well, you can design a game. There's tools available for free, everywhere. It's like, if you want to be a game designer, nothing's stopping you. You can. But if you want to get someone to pay you to be a game designer, that's another thing.
But as long as they get started, yeah. And then eventually,
exactly.
hopefully their work bears fruit in the future, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I would say in game design, it's like a quote I heard once or read once, and it was, good design is achieved not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to remove. And I would say that's a great piece of advice. It's like people are trying to design a game and they keep thinking of ideas to add in, you want to come up with new ideas to add into your game, but at the same time, sometimes you got to pull stuff away, right? It's like a recipe. You don't want to take every spice in your cabinet and mix it into the cake or whatever. You gotta pick the right ingredients, and you gotta take out the right ingredients to make a good game.
And like I say, complexity is bad. Like if you make a game too complex, people are just gonna feel overwhelmed and not want to play it.
Right.
Say that quote again, because that quote is really good.
Yeah, I said it's game design is achieved not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to remove.
Oh yeah, great quote.
And then for programming, I would say the best piece of advice I got was just, don't be a perfectionist. Like a lot of people try to build this like beautifully architected code base. And I mean, that's good. It's good to have a foundation, but sometimes you just got to ship the game. And it's, if it's like you're going to spend a day redesigning this whole system, or you could just put in one line of code that's like not super, it's not the nicest way to do it, but it gets it done in like a few minutes. And sometimes you just got to put the hack in there because you got to at the end of the day, you got to put the game out.
Yeah. What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I would say this is good for like everything in life. And, it's just figure out the first step you need to take to get on your objective or your goal. So, like some days I'll be working on this really difficult programming problem and I'm trying to think about it in my head, and it's really hard. So I'll just sit there and like, okay, well, I got to open the programming editor first, so I'll do that. It's like, just if you feel like you're having trouble getting motivated or overwhelmed, just say, okay, I'm just going to take the first step. Like, I'm just going to open my editor. Okay, well now I'm going to like open, this, and you just do, and they say, okay, well maybe I'll just write the function name or something like that. Just do very simple steps, and then once you start doing those steps, it's like easier and easier to do the next one, and then pretty soon you're done.
Oh yeah, just get started. Well, like one thing I do every single morning is I write my goals down, and so one of my goals is to create this podcast. So every single morning, I'm telling myself I'm gonna create this podcast. I have to go out there and email people to get an interview. I write that down every single morning to remind myself what I need to do on that day. And it's a powerful thing when you write your goal down and you memorize it. It just sticks into your head. The more you write about it and the more you read it out loud or in your mind, every day, just try to write your goal in the morning and just get to it. What book would you recommend and why?
I would say as far as game design, there's the Fundamentals of Game Design. The first one was by Ernest Adams and Andrew Rawlings. But anyway, it's an amazingly good book on game design. Yeah, I'd say like one of the best tools out there is like source control, man. And basically what you do is you create a repository, and you can put all your code in there. It's kind of like you put it, but every time you make a change, you upload your change, and it keeps like a change log. So like you can always roll back to previous versions of your code, and it's really great. It's a great tool for even small developers because I've seen so many people who don't use it, and even on my own projects, if I'm the only person, I do it. And if you're collaborating with somebody, you can both update it independently. It's just really good. So.
All right, now this next question is a bit of a doozy, so take your time and think about it if you have to. Imagine you woke up in the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of, and you have a laptop. What would you do in the next few days on a path to become a great game developer?
If it's a new world, you'd have to see what the kind of the state of things are and what's out there. Do a little research, then decide, what type of game developer you want to be. Do you want to be an independent game developer? Do you want to work at a AAA studio? And then depending on those, those questions, I'd say, okay, do I have the skill set that I need? And if you don't, how do you get it? So it's like, if you want to be a programmer, if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a designer, a couple of those, like maybe go to get a degree in computer science or go to like an art institute, get a degree in art, and then start learning, developing your skills. And once you have your skills, then start working on games. And if you can't get a job in the industry, then just make games yourself. There's mod tools. Find a game you really like and make a mod for it, or come up with a simple idea for like a mobile game, or even a complex idea. I'd say come up with a simple idea and then just do it on your own. And it's like, once if you apply for a job as a game developer, they're gonna ask you what your experience is, and if you've already worked on something and you've finished a product, you can just say, hey, well, I haven't worked for any companies, but here's a game I made, check it out, and that'll go a long way.
Yeah, you just gave them the roadmap from beginning to end. Yeah, research, figure out what you want to do. Take classes or read books based on that, and try to find a job. Yeah, and become a game developer, and just start doing it. All right, yeah. Give us a parting piece of guidance in how we can connect with you.
I would say, I think I said this already, but if you want to be a game developer, nothing's stopping you. Just do it. Go out there, find out what decide what you want to do, and then just start doing it. And you're going to build those, you're going to demonstrate your abilities, and that'll lead, to success. If you want to get a hold of me, you can send me an email. It's keith@lazy8studios.com. And, you could probably follow me on Twitter, but I don't ever post there because I don't think I'm famous enough yet. So,
Keith, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. We appreciate it, and we look forward to your work. Until then, we will catch you next time. Thanks.
Later.
Thank you, Game Devs, for listening. And remember that knowledge is only potential power. Execution is the game. So equip yourself with the best loadout and take action today. Go check out GameDevLoadout.com for all the resources. You can also subscribe to my email list to get an awesome freebie, or contact me for feedback, because I would love to hear what you have to say. Until then, join me on the next episode. T-Chan out.